Happy Valentine's. Stuck at work. The message lit up on Evelyn Carter's phone at exactly 7:12 p.m., and at that exact same moment she was sitting 2 tables behind her husband, watching him lean across a candlelit booth and kiss another woman like it was something they had practiced, something familiar, something easy. She didn't react. She didn't stand up. She didn't even breathe differently. The restaurant was warm, dimly lit, the kind of place people chose for anniversaries or apologies that cost at least a few $100s, with soft jazz threading through the low hum of conversation and the faint scent of butter and seared steak hanging in the air. But all of that seemed to flatten into something distant and irrelevant as her eyes stayed fixed on Michael Carter's hand resting at the small of the woman's back, steady, confident, like it belonged there. The woman, Sophie Lang, laughed quietly at something he said, her posture relaxed, her head tilting just slightly before she leaned in again. And this time the kiss lasted a fraction longer, unhurried, unafraid. That was the first thing Evelyn understood. This wasn't new. This wasn't a mistake. This was routine. Her phone was still in her hand, the screen dimming now, the message sitting there like a poorly written joke. Happy Valentine's. She turned it face down on the table without looking away from them. Her water glass sat untouched. The condensation slid slowly down the side, leaving a faint ring on the white linen. Around her, couples leaned toward each other, sharing desserts, exchanging small smiles, unaware that 2 tables over, a marriage had just revealed itself for what it really was. Evelyn shifted slightly in her seat, just enough to adjust her view through the reflection in the dark window beside her. She didn't want to be obvious. She didn't want to interrupt. Not yet. Michael reached for something inside his jacket, then paused, saying something that made Sophie smile again, softer this time, like she already knew what was coming next. Evelyn's eyes followed the movement automatically, cataloging it without emotion. Details mattered. Timing mattered. And whatever this was, it didn't feel like a simple dinner. It felt staged. Deliberate. She let her gaze drift for a second, scanning the room out of habit more than intention, and that was when she noticed the man sitting at the adjacent table, angled just enough toward the same booth, his attention fixed in the same direction as hers, his expression not shocked, not confused, but tired, like he had been expecting this moment and was simply waiting for it to confirm itself. Their eyes met briefly. He didn't look away. He gave the smallest nod, almost imperceptible, as if acknowledging something unspoken between them. Evelyn looked back to Michael and Sophie, her face calm, her posture unchanged, her pulse steady. She didn't know the full story yet, but she knew one thing with absolute clarity. This wasn't just an affair. And whatever was about to unfold, Michael had no idea she was already watching. The man did not speak immediately. He simply lifted his glass, took a slow sip, and set it back down with the kind of controlled precision that suggested he had been sitting there for a while, watching, waiting, confirming something he had already suspected. Evelyn kept her eyes forward, but her attention shifted just enough to register him fully now. Early 60s, maybe, gray at the temples, posture straight but tired, like someone carrying more information than he wanted. When he finally leaned slightly toward her, his voice was low, steady, and careful not to carry beyond their table. If you walk over there right now, he said, they will lie better. Evelyn did not look at him. I am not planning to make a scene, she replied quietly. That was true. Not because she was calm by nature, but because something deeper had already settled inside her. A kind of clarity. The man gave a small nod, as if that answer confirmed something for him. Good, he said. Because this is not the part that matters. Evelyn let that sit for a moment. Her gaze returned to Michael and Sophie. They were closer now, their conversation quieter, more focused. Sophie's hand rested lightly on the table, fingers angled toward Michael's, not touching, but close enough to suggest habit. Familiar distance. Who is she? Evelyn asked, her tone even almost neutral. Sophie Lang, the man replied. A brief pause. My wife. That landed differently than the kiss. Evelyn's eyes did not widen. Her shoulders did not tense. But something recalibrated. How long? She asked. Long enough to stop asking that question, he said. His mouth curved slightly, but there was no humor in it. Evelyn nodded once, slow. Not agreement. Just acknowledgement. Across the room, Michael reached into his jacket again, and this time he did not stop, He pulled out a thick envelope, the kind used for documents, not letters, and placed it on the table between them. Sophie did not hesitate. She picked it up immediately, opening it just enough to glance inside before closing it again with a small, satisfied nod. No surprise. No confusion. Evelyn's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger but in focus. That was not how people reacted to something unexpected. That was how they reacted to something agreed upon. You see it, the man beside her said quietly. It was not a question. Evelyn did not answer right away. She watched as Sophie reached into her bag and pulled out a slim folder, sliding it across to Michael in a motion that mirrored his. Equal exchange. Michael took it quickly, almost too quickly, and tucked it into his jacket without opening it. His eyes flicked briefly around the room, a quick scan, then back to Sophie. Careful. Controlled. That is not dinner, Evelyn said finally. The man shook his head. No, he replied. It is not. A server passed by their table, asking softly if they needed anything else. Evelyn shook her head without looking away. The man did the same. The server moved on, leaving them in that same quiet pocket of observation. I hired someone last week, the man said after a moment. Private investigator. I thought it was just what you think it is. He gestured subtly toward the booth. But then the meetings started happening during the day. Offices. Not restaurants. Evelyn's fingers rested lightly against the edge of her glass. Still steady. Documents, she said. Yes. He exhaled slowly. And lawyers. Evelyn finally turned her head just enough to look at him directly. You are sure? I do not sit in restaurants like this on Valentine's Day unless I am sure, he said. That was fair. Evelyn looked back at Michael. He was smiling now, relaxed like a man closing something in his favor. Sophie mirrored that expression, calm, confident, unbothered. For a moment everything aligned. The timing, the message, the location, the envelope. It was too clean to be coincidence, too structured to be impulsive. Evelyn felt it settle into place, piece by piece, not as a burst of emotion, but as a quiet understanding. This was not just betrayal. This was preparation. And whatever they were planning, it had already moved past the point of stopping. She reached for her water, took a small sip, and set it back down with deliberate care. Then we let them finish, she said. The man studied her for a second, then gave a slow nod. That is exactly what I was hoping you would say. Evelyn did not smile. She did not look away. Her eyes stayed on Michael as he leaned closer to Sophie, speaking in a low voice that never reached her table. He looked certain, comfortable, in control. And that was the only mistake that mattered. Because he still believed he was the only one who understood what was happening. Michael did not open the folder right away. He kept it tucked inside his jacket like something too valuable to expose in public, his posture relaxed but deliberate, the kind of controlled ease that came from believing everything was already decided. Sophie leaned back slightly in her seat, her expression calm, almost satisfied, as if the outcome of whatever this was had never been in doubt. Evelyn watched the space between them more than their faces now. The table, the distance, the timing of their movements. Patterns revealed more than reactions. Beside her, Daniel shifted just enough to rest his forearms on the table, his gaze steady on the same scene. He is careful, he said quietly. More than he used to be. Evelyn did not look at him. People get careful when there is something to lose, she replied. Daniel let out a short breath that could have been agreement. Or something to gain. That landed differently. Evelyn's eyes flicked once more to the jacket where the folder had disappeared. Gain. Not just escape. Not just another relationship. Something structured. Something planned. Across the room, Michael reached for his glass, took a slow sip, then leaned forward again, his voice low, his expression focused now. Sophie nodded as he spoke, her fingers tapping lightly once against the table before going still. A signal. A habit. Not nerves. Timing. Evelyn catalogued it without thinking. Every movement felt measured. Intentional. What does she do? Evelyn asked after a moment. Daniel's answer came immediately. Corporate real estate. Acquisitions. Contracts. The kind of work that requires paperwork, signatures, and people who do not ask too many questions. Evelyn absorbed that in silence. Corporate contracts. Documents exchanged in a restaurant on Valentine's Day. Michael had not chosen this night by accident. He had chosen it because it gave him cover. Because it made everything look like something else. A dinner. A date. A distraction. Evelyn's hand rested lightly against the table. Her fingers still. Her breathing even. "And you," she said, finally turning her head just enough to look at Daniel again. "You followed her here." "I followed the pattern," he said. "The same nights. The same places. The same kind of meetings." He paused, then added, "Tonight was the first time I saw him." Evelyn nodded once. That made sense. Patterns did not lie. People did. Across the room, Michael's attention shifted again, his eyes briefly scanning the restaurant before returning to Sophie. That small movement did not go unnoticed. He was checking. Not for Evelyn. For exposure. For interruption. For risk. But he did not see her. Not because she was hidden, but because he had already decided she would not be here. That assumption sat quietly between them, invisible and absolute. Evelyn reached for her water again, lifting the glass just enough to wet her lips before setting it back down in the exact same spot. Controlled. Repeated. Intentional. She was not reacting. She was observing. "If this is about contracts," she said slowly, "then it connects to something outside of them." Daniel frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Evelyn's gaze returned to Michael. "He does not move money without reason. He does not sign anything without positioning himself first." She paused, letting the thought settle into something more defined. "And he does not take risks he cannot manage." Daniel studied her for a moment, something like recognition passing through his expression. "You know him well." Evelyn did not answer that directly. Instead, she said, "I know what he thinks I do not understand." That was enough. Across the room, Sophie reached for her bag again, this time pulling out her phone. She glanced at the screen briefly, then turned it slightly toward Michael. He looked, nodded once, and gave a small satisfied smile. Confirmation. Not surprise. Evelyn felt the final piece click into place, not loudly, not dramatically, but with a quiet certainty that left no room for doubt. This was not just preparation. This was execution. Something had already been set in motion, and tonight was simply a step in a sequence that had begun long before this dinner. She leaned back slightly in her chair, her posture relaxed now, almost comfortable. From a distance, she would have looked like anyone else in the room. A woman finishing dinner alone on a holiday evening. Calm. Unbothered. Invisible. "They think they are ahead," Daniel said quietly. Evelyn's eyes did not leave Michael. "They are," she replied. A small pause. Then just as quietly, "For now." Michael checked his watch, not in a hurry, but in rhythm, like someone aligning himself with a schedule that mattered more than the moment in front of him. Sophie noticed it too. She gathered her things with quiet efficiency, sliding her phone back into her bag, smoothing the edge of the tablecloth where it had shifted slightly, her movements precise, controlled, practiced. They were finishing. Not because they were done talking, but because whatever needed to be exchanged already had been. Evelyn watched the transition without blinking. This was the part most people missed. The exit. The way people behaved when they believed the important part was over. Michael reached for the check before the server even arrived, placing his card down with a small, confident gesture. No hesitation. No discussion. He was in control of the ending, just as much as he had been in control of the meeting. Sophie did not argue. She never had to. That told Evelyn more than anything they had said. Across from her, Daniel shifted again, his gaze sharpening slightly. "They are leaving," he said under his breath. Evelyn nodded once. "Yes." Her tone did not change. No urgency. No reaction. Just confirmation. The server returned, processed the payment, and disappeared again into the low hum of the restaurant. Michael stood first, straightening his jacket with a quick, habitual motion, the same jacket that now held the folder. Sophie followed a second later, adjusting her coat over her shoulders, her posture relaxed, her expression unchanged. They looked like any other couple finishing dinner. That was the point. They walked toward the exit side by side, not touching now, but close enough to suggest familiarity that did not need to be displayed. Evelyn tracked them without moving her head, her eyes following their reflection in the dark glass rather than turning directly. It was cleaner that way, less visible. Daniel watched them openly, his jaw tightening just slightly as they passed through the doorway and disappeared into the night beyond the valet stand. The space they left behind felt almost louder, like the absence of something deliberate. Evelyn reached for her glass again, taking a slow sip, letting the quiet settle around her before placing it back down in the exact same ring it had left on the table earlier. Consistent. Controlled. "We should go," Daniel said after a moment. Evelyn did not stand immediately. She let a few seconds pass, her gaze still fixed on the empty booth where Michael had been sitting, as if memorizing the position of everything. The chair. The angle of the plates. The faint impression left in the cushion. Details stayed. People moved. That mattered. "Not yet," she said. Daniel looked at her, not confused but curious now. "Why?" Evelyn finally turned her head, meeting his eyes fully for the first time since they had spoken. "Because if we follow them now we are reacting," she said. A small pause. "And I am not reacting." Daniel held her gaze for a second longer, then gave a slow nod. He understood. This was not about catching them again. It was about understanding what had already happened. Evelyn reached for her phone, flipping it over on the table and unlocking the screen with a calm, deliberate motion. The message was still there. "Happy Valentine's." She looked at it for exactly 1 second before opening a different screen. Not messages. Not calls. Something else. Her thumb moved once, then again, precise, intentional, as if she already knew exactly where she needed to go. Daniel watched without asking. That was another thing Evelyn noticed. He did not interrupt. He observed. "Useful. What are you doing?" he asked quietly anyway. Evelyn did not look up. "Confirming something," she replied. Her eyes moved across the screen, scanning, comparing, aligning details that most people would not think to connect. Dates. Transfers. Names that did not belong together until they did. She paused, then exhaled slowly, not in frustration but in recognition. "Of course," she said under her breath. Daniel leaned slightly closer. "What?" Evelyn locked the phone and set it back down, her expression unchanged, but something behind her eyes had sharpened. "He is not just moving something away from me," she said. "He is moving it toward her." Daniel's brow furrowed. "What does that mean?" Evelyn stood then, smoothing her coat with a single controlled motion, her posture straight, her movements unhurried. "It means," she said calmly, "this was never just about leaving." She glanced once toward the exit where Michael had disappeared, her face composed, her voice steady. It was about taking. The night air outside the restaurant was colder than Evelyn expected, sharp enough to cut through the warmth that had clung to her coat inside. But she did not react to that either. She stepped onto the sidewalk with the same measured pace, her heels steady against the concrete, her posture straight, as if nothing had shifted at all. The valet stand was busy, engines idling, headlights stretching across the curb in soft white lines. And for a moment, everything looked ordinary again. That was the danger of moments like this. They tried to disguise themselves as normal. Daniel came up beside her, his gaze scanning the parking area instinctively, searching for movement, for direction, for them. "They are gone," he said quietly. Evelyn followed his line of sight, but not with urgency. She did not need to see Michael to know where he was going. Patterns did not disappear. They extended. "No," she said calmly. "They are just ahead." Daniel glanced at her, something like curiosity sharpening again. "You sound certain." Evelyn's eyes moved across the row of cars, not looking for a specific vehicle, but for behavior, for disruption, for timing. Then she saw it. A black sedan pulling out too smoothly, too quickly, merging into traffic without hesitation. Not rushed, not careless, intentional. "There," she said softly, not pointing, not drawing attention, just marking it. Daniel followed her gaze and exhaled under his breath. "You are sure that is them?" Evelyn did not answer right away. She watched the car disappear into the line of red tail lights stretching down the road, then nodded once. He does not linger after something like this, she said. He moves. That was how Michael operated. Clean exits. No loose ends. Or at least that was what he believed. The valet approached, holding out her keys with a polite smile, but Evelyn did not reach for them immediately. She stood there for 1 second longer than necessary, her mind already several steps ahead of where her body was. Then she took the keys, thanked him quietly, and walked toward her car without looking back. Daniel followed. If we do not follow them now, he said, keeping his voice low, we lose the trail. Evelyn unlocked the car, opened the door and paused before getting in. She turned slightly, just enough to meet his eyes again. We are not tracking them, she said. We are understanding them. That difference mattered. Daniel studied her for a moment, then gave a slow nod, accepting the shift in approach even if he was not used to it. Evelyn slid into the driver's seat, her movements smooth, controlled, every action deliberate. The interior of the car smelled faintly of leather and something familiar, something steady. She closed the door, placed the keys in the ignition, but did not start the engine right away. Instead, she reached for her phone again, unlocking it with the same calm precision as before. Daniel stood outside the passenger side for a second, then moved around and got in without speaking, closing the door quietly behind him. The world outside softened into muted sound, distant engines, low voices, the occasional car door closing. Inside it was contained, focused. Evelyn's screen lit her face faintly as she navigated through a series of files, her thumb moving with certainty, not searching but retrieving. She opened a document, then another, cross-referencing something only she seemed to fully understand. Numbers, dates, transfers, patterns that had once looked separate now aligning into something clearer. Daniel watched the screen but he did not interrupt. He had learned that part already. Evelyn's eyes moved once more across the information, then stopped, completely still. There it is, she said quietly. Not surprise. Confirmation. Daniel leaned slightly closer. What did you find? Evelyn tilted the phone just enough for him to see a name repeated across multiple entries. Subtle, easy to overlook unless you knew where to look. She is not just involved, Evelyn said. She is positioned. Daniel frowned. Positioned for what? Evelyn locked the phone and set it down on the center console. Her expression unchanged, but something beneath it had shifted into something sharper, colder, more defined. She finally started the engine, the soft hum filling the silence between them. For transfer, she said calmly. Assets. Control. Ownership. Daniel leaned back slightly, processing that. You think he is moving everything to her? Evelyn adjusted the rearview mirror, her eyes steady, her voice even. Not everything, she said. Small pause. Then with quiet certainty, just the parts he thinks I will not notice. She put the car into drive, pulling smoothly out of the parking space, merging into traffic with the same controlled precision Michael had used minutes earlier. The difference was she was not trying to disappear. She was positioning herself. And for the first time that night, something close to intention settled fully into place. He thought this was already decided. He thought the sequence was his. But he had made one miscalculation. He had assumed she would remain exactly where he left her. And that was the only assumption that mattered. The traffic moved steadily, a slow current of red lights and quiet motion stretching across the road ahead. But Evelyn did not rush to keep up with anything. She drove at a consistent pace, hands resting lightly on the steering wheel, her posture composed, her expression unchanged, as if this were just another drive home at the end of a normal evening. Daniel sat beside her, his attention shifting between the road and her, trying to understand not just what she knew, but how far ahead she already was. If he is transferring assets, he said after a moment, choosing his words carefully, then there has to be documentation, legal structure. He cannot just move things quietly. Evelyn nodded once, her eyes still on the road. He knows that, she replied, which means he is not trying to hide it completely. He is trying to delay when it becomes visible. That distinction settled heavily in the car. Delay was strategy. Delay meant planning. Daniel leaned back slightly, absorbing that. So he is buying time. Evelyn's fingers adjusted slightly on the wheel, a small controlled movement. He is buying position, she corrected. Time is just the tool. The streetlights passed in steady intervals, casting brief bands of light across the windshield, illuminating her face for a fraction of a second at a time. Calm, focused, not reacting. Daniel glanced at her again. And where does that leave you? Evelyn did not answer immediately. She let the question sit, not because she did not know, but because she was choosing how to define it. Exactly where I need to be, she said finally. That was the first time there was something different in her tone. Not emotion. Not anger. Direction. She signaled and changed lanes smoothly. The movement precise, intentional, like everything else she had done since the moment she saw the message. Behind them, the restaurant was already gone. Just another building fading into the distance. Ahead, the city opened into wider roads, quieter intersections, fewer distractions. This was where decisions settled. Daniel watched her for another second before speaking again. What is your next move? Evelyn exhaled slowly, not out of stress but out of calculation. I do not make moves without context, she said. And now I have it. She reached briefly toward the center console, picking up her phone again. But this time she did not open any files. Instead, she scrolled through her contacts, stopping on a name she had not touched in months. She did not call yet. She just looked at it. Timing mattered. Daniel noticed. Someone who can help, he said. Evelyn gave a slight nod. Someone who already knows the structure, she replied. Before it was changed. That was important. Whatever Michael was doing, it was not new from the ground up. It was built on something that already existed. Something Evelyn had once been part of. That realization did not bring anger. It brought clarity. The car slowed as they approached a red light, the intersection quiet, almost empty at this hour. Evelyn stopped smoothly, her hands still steady, her eyes forward. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Daniel said, If you are right, then he believes you are out of position. Evelyn's gaze did not shift. He believes I am not paying attention, she corrected. A small pause. Then with quiet certainty, that is the position he gave me. The light remained red, the seconds stretching just long enough to feel intentional. Daniel studied her profile, the calm, the control, the absence of visible reaction. And you are going to let him keep believing that, he said. Evelyn's lips curved just slightly, not quite a smile, but close enough to suggest something forming beneath the surface. For now, she said. The light turned green. She pressed the accelerator gently, the car moving forward without hesitation, merging back into motion as if nothing had changed. But everything had. Because in that moment, the direction was no longer uncertain. It was set. She would not confront him. She would not interrupt the process he had started. She would let it continue. Let it unfold. Let him commit fully to every decision he thought was hidden. And then, when everything was in place, when every document was signed, every transfer initiated, every assumption solidified, she would step in. Not to stop it, but to redefine it. Daniel leaned back in his seat, finally understanding the scale of what she was considering. You are not trying to prevent this, he said quietly. Evelyn's eyes stayed on the road, her voice calm, steady, absolute. No, she replied. A brief pause. Then, almost as if stating something obvious, I am going to use it. The car turned into a quieter street, the kind lined with evenly spaced houses and dim porch lights, where everything looked settled on the surface and nothing suggested disruption, and Evelyn slowed slightly as she approached the corner, not because she needed to, but because she was thinking several steps ahead, aligning timing with intent. She pulled into her driveway with a smooth, controlled motion and turned off the engine, the sudden silence inside the car settling in around them like a deliberate pause. Daniel did not move right away. Neither did she. For a moment they both sat there, the faint ticking sound of the cooling engine the only noise in the space. Then Evelyn reached for her phone again. This time she did not hesitate. She pressed the contact and lifted the phone to her ear, her posture unchanged, her expression calm. The line rang once, twice. Then a voice answered, steady, professional, familiar. This is Thomas Green. Evelyn did not waste words. It is Evelyn Carter, she said. A brief pause on the other end, just long enough to register recognition. Evelyn, he replied, his tone shifting slightly, more attentive now. It has been a while. Yes, she said simply. No explanation. No small talk. I need you to review something. Another pause, shorter this time. When? Evelyn glanced forward through the windshield, her reflection faint in the glass, composed, steady. Tonight, she said. Daniel turned his head slightly at that, but did not interrupt. Thomas exhaled quietly on the other end. That is not how this usually works. Evelyn's voice did not change. It is how this works now. There was no push in her tone. No urgency. Just certainty. That was enough. Thomas understood the difference. Send me what you have, he said after a moment. Evelyn lowered the phone, ending the call without another word. She did not explain. She did not need to. She unlocked the screen again, her fingers moving quickly now, not searching but selecting. Files. Records. Entries that had once seemed routine, now reframed into something else entirely. She forwarded them one by one, each action precise, intentional, leaving nothing unnecessary behind. Daniel watched quietly, his understanding deepening with each second. You already had access to all of this, he said finally. Evelyn nodded once. I built most of it, she replied. That mattered more than anything else. Systems carried memory. Structure carried intent. And she knew both. She sent the last file, then set the phone down on her lap, her hands resting lightly over it. Still. Controlled. Waiting but not passively. Time again was a tool. What happens when he sees this? Daniel asked. Evelyn shook her head slightly. He will not see it, she said. Not yet. That was the point. This was not exposure. This was preparation. Inside the house the lights were off. Everything exactly as it had been when she left. Unchanged. Predictable. That too was part of the structure Michael believed in. Stability on the surface. Movement underneath. Evelyn opened the car door and stepped out, the cool air settling around her again, grounding steady. Daniel followed, closing his door quietly behind him. You are staying ahead of him, he said, more statement than question now. Evelyn walked toward the front door, her pace even, her posture unchanged. No, she said calmly. I am letting him stay ahead. Daniel frowned slightly, trying to reconcile that. Why? Evelyn reached the door, unlocked it, and paused for just a second before stepping inside. Because he is walking into the position I need him in, she said. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet that came from routine, from expectation, from a life that had been built on consistency. Evelyn stepped inside and set her keys down in the same place she always did. Her movements unchanged, her environment undisturbed. That was important. Nothing about this needed to look different. Daniel closed the door behind them, the soft click echoing briefly in the entryway. And when he gets there? He asked quietly. Evelyn turned slightly, meeting his eyes for a moment, her expression calm, controlled, but now carrying something else beneath it. Not anger. Not even resolve. Precision. Then I changed the terms, she said. Upstairs the house remained still, unaware, unchanged. But the structure underneath it had already begun to shift. Not visibly. Not yet. But it was there. And Michael Carter, wherever he was at that moment, had no idea that the plan he believed was his had already started to belong to someone else. The house settled around them in quiet layers, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the faint tick of a wall clock, the kind of familiar sounds that usually meant safety, routine, predictability. But tonight they felt different, not threatening, just irrelevant, like background noise to something already in motion. Evelyn walked into the kitchen without turning on the main lights, letting only the undercabinet glow illuminate the space in a low, steady wash. It was enough. She did not need brightness. She needed clarity. Daniel remained a few steps behind, watching her move through the room as if nothing had changed, as if this were just another evening returning home. She placed her phone on the counter, then reached for a glass, filling it halfway with water, her movements precise, unhurried, consistent with everything she had done since the moment she saw him. He will come back late, she said calmly, not looking at Daniel. He always does after something like this. Daniel leaned slightly against the edge of the counter. His arms relaxed but his attention fixed on her. And you will be here, he said. Evelyn took a small sip of water, then set the glass down in the same exact spot she had placed it countless times before. Exactly where he expects me to be, she replied. That was the structure Michael trusted. Predictable patterns. Unchanged behavior. That was how he measured control. Evelyn understood that better than anyone. She turned slightly, opening a drawer, retrieving a thin folder, one that had been there long before tonight, long before any of this had revealed itself so clearly. She placed it on the counter beside her phone but did not open it yet. Daniel noticed. You were already preparing, he said quietly. Evelyn did not confirm it directly. I keep records, she said instead. That was enough. Records were memory. Records were leverage. Records were truth that did not depend on anyone's version of events. The phone buzzed softly against the counter. A message. Evelyn did not rush to it. She let it vibrate once then stop. Then she picked it up and unlocked the screen. A short response from Thomas Green. Received. Reviewing now. She read it once then set the phone back down, her expression unchanged. Daniel watched her closely. How long? He asked. Evelyn considered that for a second. Not long, she said. He will see it immediately. That was the advantage of someone who already knew the structure. No explanation needed. No context required. Just recognition. Upstairs the house remained still, unchanged. Every room exactly as it had been when she left. Every detail aligned with the version of reality Michael believed he controlled. Evelyn reached for the folder then, opening it slowly, revealing documents that had been organized with care, each page placed intentionally, each section marked, not for presentation but for understanding. She flipped through them with practiced ease, not reading line by line, but confirming what she already knew was there. Dates. Agreements. Signatures. The foundation beneath everything Michael was now trying to move. Daniel stepped closer, glancing down at the pages without fully reading them. He cannot just override this, he said. Evelyn closed the folder gently, her hand resting on top of it for a moment. He is not trying to override it, she said. He is trying to reroute it. That was the difference. And that difference was where everything would shift. The phone buzzed again. This time she picked it up immediately. Another message. Short. Direct. Call me. Evelyn did not hesitate. She answered, lifting the phone to her ear, her posture unchanged, her voice calm. Yes. Thomas's voice came through, sharper now, more focused. Evelyn, what you sent me, this is not small. I know, she replied. No emphasis. No explanation. Just acknowledgement. There was a brief pause on the line, then Thomas spoke again, slower this time. If he executes this fully, you lose more than you think. Evelyn's eyes moved slightly, not to the documents, not to Daniel but forward, as if she were already looking at something beyond the room. He will execute it, she said calmly. Another pause. Then Thomas asked, do you want me to stop it? That question lingered for exactly 1 second. Evelyn's answer came without hesitation. No. Daniel's gaze shifted to her immediately, but he did not interrupt. On the other end, Thomas was silent for a moment longer. Then what? Do you want? He asked. Evelyn's voice did not change. Not louder. Not sharper. Just precise. I want you to prepare to reverse it, she said. The words settled into the space like something already decided. Upstairs the house remained quiet. Outside the night continued without interruption. And somewhere across the city, Michael Carter was moving forward, confident, certain, unaware that the structure he believed he was controlling had already begun to turn in a direction he had never considered. The call ended without a goodbye, just a quiet disconnect that left the room exactly as it had been, still, controlled and waiting, and Evelyn lowered the phone slowly, placing it back on the counter with the same precision she had used all night, as if every movement now carried weight beyond itself. Daniel watched her, his expression no longer uncertain, but measured, trying to map the scale of what she had just set into motion. Reverse it, he repeated quietly, not questioning, just acknowledging. Evelyn did not respond immediately. She closed the folder in front of her and slid it slightly to the side, aligning it perfectly with the edge of the counter. A small detail, but one that mattered. Order mattered. Structure mattered. She reached for her glass again, taking a small sip, then set it down exactly where it had been before. Nothing disrupted. Nothing out of place. He thinks the final step is transfer, she said calmly. It is not. Daniel shifted slightly, leaning forward just enough to show he was following. Then what is it? Evelyn's eyes moved briefly toward the hallway, toward the quiet upstairs, then back to the counter in front of her. Control, she said. A simple word. But it held everything. The house remained silent, but time was moving. That was the part Michael relied on. That people would react too soon, interrupt too early, reveal what they knew before it was useful. Evelyn would not do that. She walked toward the living room, her step steady, her posture unchanged, every movement consistent with the version of herself Michael expected to come home, to wait, to continue the routine. Daniel followed, slower, absorbing the environment, the details, the normalcy that now felt like part of something constructed. Evelyn sat down on the edge of the sofa, not sinking into it, just resting, composed, her hands folded lightly in her lap. She was not waiting passively. She was holding position. When he comes back, Daniel said quietly, what happens? Evelyn looked at him for a moment, her expression calm, almost neutral. Nothing, she replied. That answer settled heavier than anything else she had said. Nothing, Daniel repeated. Evelyn nodded once. He will talk, she said. He will explain something that sounds reasonable. Late meeting. Work. Timing. A slight pause. He will believe that is enough. Daniel studied her, trying to find the reaction that was not there. And you will let him. Evelyn's lips moved just slightly, not quite a smile but close. I will let him finish, she said. That was the pattern. Let them speak. Let them commit. Let them define their version before it was taken apart. The clock on the wall ticked softly, each second passing with the same quiet rhythm. 10 minutes. 20. Time stretched, but it did not feel long. Felt precise. Then, finally, the sound of headlights swept briefly across the front window, followed by the low hum of an engine cutting off. Daniel's attention shifted immediately, but Evelyn did not move. Not yet. The car door outside closed. Footsteps approached. Measured. Familiar. The key turned in the lock. The door opened. Michael Carter stepped inside, his coat still on, his expression composed, exactly as expected. He paused for half a second when he saw her sitting there, then relaxed, as if that image confirmed everything he believed. You are still up, he said, his tone casual, controlled, already moving into explanation. Evelyn looked at him, her gaze steady, her posture unchanged. I was not tired, she replied simply. Michael nodded, setting his keys down, removing his coat with a practiced motion, every gesture aligned with routine. It ran late, he said. Unexpected issues. The words came easily, rehearsed without sounding rehearsed. Evelyn did not interrupt. She did not challenge. She just listened. That was enough to let him continue. I did not want to bother you earlier, he added, moving toward the kitchen, not looking at her directly now, as if the explanation did not require her full attention. That was the mistake. Evelyn's eyes followed him, not with suspicion, not with accusation, but with quiet observation. That makes sense, she said calmly. Michael paused slightly at that, just for a fraction of a second, as if the lack of resistance had removed something he expected to push against. Then he continued, opening the refrigerator, moving through the motions of someone returning to normal. Everything is handled, he said. Evelyn tilted her head just slightly. Is it? She asked. Not challenging. Not emotional. Just precise. Michael glanced back at her then, a small shift in his expression, something almost imperceptible, like a flicker of recalculation. Yes, he said. Everything is in place. Evelyn nodded once, slow, acknowledging the statement as if it were simply information. Good, she said. A brief pause. Then, just as calmly, that will make the next part easier. Michael's hand stopped for a second against the counter. Just a second. Then he turned slightly, looking at her more directly now. What next part? He asked. Evelyn met his gaze, her expression unchanged, her voice steady, controlled, and absolute. The part where you realize, she said quietly, you were never the one deciding where any of this was going. The room held that sentence for a moment, suspended, precise, unavoidable. And for the first time that night, something shifted in Michael's expression. Not fully. Not yet. But enough. Because he had just stepped into the exact position she had been waiting for. And he did not even know it.